to move the world forward. I will not give you his bio because we are going to limit his time a lot.
Thank you very much. I think you've done a lot of injustice to me. I came here prepared with 17 pages to celebrate Raila Odinga, and now I have to compress it in a few minutes. Okay, my earliest memories of Raila Odinga is when I was about 10 years old. My parents and his parents had been neighbors in Kaloleni, Kisumu. And by that time, we had moved to Milimani, Kisumu. It was after independence, and I knew his younger siblings. And they would always talk about their two brothers, one called Uhuru and one called Aluo, who were in Europe, whom I'd never met. So when I was 10 years old, I think he must have been on holiday. I caught a glimpse of him. And his two sisters, Akinyi and Beryl Achieng, said, that is Raila. Those were my favorite people at that time, because Beryl taught me how to dance soul. You know soul music? Shaking your head. And Akinyi was the polite disciplinarian one. So I then encountered him for the first time, talked to him for the first time when I was a student at the University of Nairobi. I was studying engineering, and he had been a lecturer in that faculty. So we talked about engineering issues with him, and we talked about politics. And we talked about politics and agreed that the very minimum we wanted in Kenya was to introduce social democracy. So in October, I was in my house in Kisumu because I was tired. The day before, I'd been in Siaya organizing for a stand of the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, because there was going to be the Siaya International Trade and Industry Conference. And on the Friday, Raila was supposed to be in a forum with me to popularize nuclear power. Since my student days, we had talked about introducing nuclear power in Kenya. And I was very pleased to have been appointed this year to be the chairman of the board of the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency. And I was waiting for him to come there, and we talked to people about nuclear power. I got a telephone call very early in the morning that he had passed on, and it didn't register. In fact, even now, it has not quite registered that he has passed on. But if he has gone, who was Raila? What was Raila? What was his life? What was his contribution? What is his influence? Karl Marx says, men make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly found and given and transmitted from the past. Raila Odinga made history in circumstances defined by history and geography. But great people, those are by circumstances whose boundaries are defined by history and geography. But the great people are those who push the boundaries of history and geography. And I'm convinced Raila Odinga was one of them. I was supposed to come here and talk about Raila and the Constitution, but what was the Constitution of Kenya? What's the context? The political struggles in Kenya started in the 1920s. The Kavirondo Taxpayers Association of Ezekiel Apindi were there. Then the Kikuyu Central Association came in, of Harry Thuku and others, and they were agitating for more rights. You remember where now the Central Police Station is? When there was a strike and there was a lady called Mary Nanjiru, she said, men, give me trousers if you are cowards. And that was Raila Odinga. If you are cowards, give me something. So the struggles went on, but the real political party in Kenya was formed in 1944. It was called the Kenya African Union. Jomo Kenyatta came back from Britain in 1946, and he joined Kenya African Union, which was a fairly progressive party, because in the late 40s, it got help from people like Makan Singh, who were in the trade union movement, Kibaki and others. But you know, by 1952, the agitation for rights, the agitation for turned into the Mau Mau struggles of 1952. And that changed the dynamics of Kenya. And that changed the position where I was born. My father, my eldest sister was born in Nairobi. But me and my elder brother and me were born in Kisumu. Simply because at the outbreak of Mau Mau, my father was arrested and therefore he had to relocate to Kisumu. Otherwise, I would have been a Nairobi-born person. By the mid-1950s, the British were now decolonizing Kenya. They were co-opting a new class of Kenyan Africans who would be a buffer between the African masses and themselves. So they had the Swinnerton Plan, which was to create some rural aristocracy of peasantry, and then they got some Africans into Lejiko. Jaramogi Odinga being possibly the most progressive of the lot. But then, after some time, there were struggles in it. A brilliant young trade unionist called Tom Mboya also joined Lejiko, and by the early 1960s, the Kenyans were taken to a place where they went to negotiate freedom, or they went to negotiate away our freedom. I don't know which is true. Odurong when? Did they negotiate us away, or did they negotiate freedom? So, it's called Lancaster House, in which a country with no written constitution would give its former colonies written constitutions. But we came out of it with two large political parties, one a little left called KANU, Kenya African National Union, one a little right called Kenya African Democratic Union, KADU. The elections happened and KANU won elections. KANU had more seats everywhere else. The constitution which they got from Lancaster House had given us some majimbo, some devolution. KANU was not for devolution. They thought it was a ploy by the whites to have the state be weak. KADU was very much for it. So in 1963, we got independence with the Majimbo Constitution, and Jomo Kenyatta became our president. In 1964, without any elections, Jomo Kenyatta became our president. But the most significant thing is that KADU dissolved itself and joined KANU. And the right-wingers in KADU went to reinforce the right wing of KANU. And there was a very bitter struggle. And the first casualty of this struggle was Pioga Makinto, who was shot dead here in Westlands in February 1962. In 1966, Jaramogi Odinga was forced out by the right wing headed by Tom Mboya in Limuru conference. Jaramogi did not take it lying down. He went and formed a left-wing political party called KPU, Kenya People's Union. I think it is, until recent times, it was the only political party which was openly advocating for socialism. Right now, we even have a few communist parties. But that struggle was carried out at a time when KANU, and now KANU reinforced with KADU, mutilated the constitution. They removed the little devolution that there was. They removed Senate. They removed many things which were happening in the country. And it went on until towards the end, KANU centralized education. Julius Okara, strong to serve. You know that when I went to school, the schools were owned by the county councils. Education was more or less devolved, but it was centralized later. So, now let's go to 1969, when the political party in Kenya more or less died. Tom Mboya was shot dead on the 5th of July in Nairobi. The further incident was that Kenyatta came to Kisumu, and I was one of the small students who went to welcome and sing for the president. And when some chaos broke out, our headmistress, Mrs. Tejpa, took us into the middle of Kisumu because there was shooting going on. There is a young boy from my school called Alnud Daya. His father, Abdul Daya, was the deputy mayor of Kisumu. He was shot dead about 400 meters away from where people were fighting. And John, who was a servant of our neighbor, was shot dead at Jubilee Market, about 4 kilometers from there. After this incident, Jaramogi was detained, KPU was banned, and therefore Kenya entered a period of one-party de jure rule, which went on until 1982, when KANU declared itself the only legal party by changing Section 2, by including Section 2A of the Constitution. Now, the people who had been struggling openly had no chance. They had no chance to run in another political party. It was KANU, and KANU alone. And we know KANU, after Mboya died, was just the provincial administration and treasury of Kenya. And the chiefs who used to sell their cards. So at this time, there were discussions, and I overheard many discussions about what to do with Kenya. When we were still discussing, one fine Saturday, something happened which we had not seen before. Paddy Onyango was in the cover, the Paddy you saw there, the elder of the Standard, denouncing the government openly and saying that, who are these Marxists they talk about? If they are Kenyans, they also have a right to rule. On the Sunday morning, we woke up to the radio telling us that we had a military government. And after that, Raila was detained. He remained there for 8 years. Many things happened in the world. By 1989, the Eastern Bloc was collapsing and multipartism was coming. So finally, Raila was released and he came out and struggled very hard for multi-party democracy through Ford and other political parties. Multipartism finally came in 1991, December 1991. We got the 1992 elections, and Moi, with less than 30% of the votes, was elected president. Another significant thing which happened is in 1994, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga died, and there was civil war in Fort Kenya, and Raila rose to prominence and finally left Fort Kenya, went to the National Development Party, resigned from the party. He did not support one party as they are doing now while still in another party. He kept good hygiene. He resigned from Fort Kenya, joined National Development Party, won his seat in Langata, and then went and formed some cooperation and alliance with Daniel Moi. Then we started agitating proper for a new constitution. We had always wanted one, even with multipartism. It didn't come. But the country went NCEC and other people, we agitated until the champion of multiparty, of a new constitution was Raila Odinga. So after the elections of 1997, the cooperation period, parliamentaries, it is select committee, PSC, the one Raila chaired, was formed for the constitutional review. The Constitution of Kenya Review Commission was formed. Yashpal Guy was hired, and bombers started when Moi was still in government. But what did Moi do? He rubbished the whole process. So it became a campaign item for the National Rainbow Coalition. The National Rainbow Coalition was formed after an MOU between LDP and NAK. Raila was the driver of that MOU. What happened that morning, I was part of a team which had negotiated an MOU with Simeon Nyachai's party, Ford people, and Okara's party there. We signed an MOU in the morning in Serena. Then, after signing the MOU, we went upstairs and negotiated with Mwai Kibaki and company, and we walked to an LDP rally in Uhuru Park. And that is when Raila said, Kibaki, tosha. And everything changed. And he campaigned very hard with Kibaki all over. And then Kibaki got the accident. I was in Mwenge House when it happened. But what did Raila say? The captain is there, is down. We continue with the struggle. And he campaigned very hard until we won the elections. Convincingly, I think 63% of the votes, and most MPs were National Rainbow Coalition. Then political immorality entered this. I'll finish in 5 minutes. Huh? No, 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes. An MOU which was negotiated and signed in public was denounced by Kibaki's side. They said it didn't exist. What we had agreed about, the Bomas process started in the new constitution. But then, when they went to Bomas in 2005, they rubbished it. And why was it rubbished? There are things they didn't want to let go, like devolution. They didn't want them at all. And who was the chair of the devolution committee? What happened to him? He shot dead. He was my drinking friend. No, uji tu hapa nani kitu. So, there was a referendum after that, which Kiraitu Murungi referred to. My old schoolmate, he was in Form 5 when I was in Form 1, but we were opposite houses. And the orange one, orange became ODM, and then ODM went to the campaigns, and I was at Bomas when we were chased away, and then Kivuitu announced. I was with those guys sitting there. You remember that day? The police came, chased us away, then they announced the results. KICC, we are KICC. Then, what happened that time? The country exploded. And that is when CMD became important. I was the chair of CMD, and Jerika Beberi was our executive director. We said, this is our country, we will not let it burn. So we were the first people actually to reach out. And even when Kofi Annan came to Kenya, we were the ones who received him. The first meeting we called of political parties to discuss this issue was almost a riot. They were in two camps and they almost killed each other. But when we called the second, third, fourth, fifth meeting, now they calmed down. Until when we went to other places, they calmed down and things were solved. And as a consequence of that, of the government formed after that, Kenya achieved its highest growth. Kenya achieved its highest growth to date in terms of the economy. But we also got the 2010 constitution. The 2010 constitution was very good, but it had a few things that I didn't like myself. First, the presidential system. Presidential system is a very imperial system. You see it in Nairobi, but its worst manifestation is in counties. It is something we must think. It is something we must think about. The other one is the electoral system. This first past the post in constituencies which are not demarcated wastes votes, and it creates persons who use a lot of money to campaign on geographical basis, insulting people from the other side and so on. So I think we should adopt the proportional representation. That is why I very enthusiastically embraced the BBI process. And we were with it with the ED here, Odurongwen, and the ODM proposals to BBI were very good. That we have proportional representation. We talked about policing. Policing should be devolved. There's no need of keeping it central, because you are the ones who know the witches and the thieves in the villages. Education majorly should be devolved. Proportional representation is the easiest way in which you can put women and other disadvantaged groups inside there, and many other things which I was going to tell you. But I have been curtailed, so I'm going to end there by saying Raila Odinga was arguably the most consequential opposition figure in modern Kenyan history. A politician who shaped the country's democratic landscape and popularized the language of devolution and equity in governance. Raila stood as a living metaphor for Kenya's struggle against centralized autocracy, having been detained, exiled, and vilified, yet never silenced. Despite never capturing the presidency, after 5 attempts, he remained the loudest voice on equitable governance, decentralization, and inclusion. And inclusion, when Raila was given a chance recently to nominate people to the cabinet, he nominated Oparanya from Western, Joho from the coast, Mbadi, Suba from the south, Wandai from wherever. He would do things like that. Beatrice Askul is my girl, yes. From Turkana and other places. When, soon after that, somebody else was given a chance, where did they all come from? Mount Kenya. Now, Raila championed the transformation of Africa through infrastructure development and industrialization. This, he said, will liberate the masses from hunger, disease, unemployment, and backwardness. Raila's style of politics embraced populistic mobilization. He employed political pragmatism with a willingness to form strategic coalitions across ideological divides to achieve systemic reforms. I am sure that history will judge Raila Odinga kindly. The struggle continues.
Thank you very much, Prof. I didn't know the way, engineering discipline works. In communication, the abstract usually is like 150 words. But now, when we get into your field, I cannot understand. So I yield, that's why we yielded as much time to you. And also, I happen to know the contribution that you made, and I was very, very hesitant. I was very, very hesitant to cut you short. I hope that the paper that you prepared will be made available so that it can also be accessed. Then we can have the full benefit of what you wanted to say, context and everything. I don't want to rush people, but there are so many voices in the room that we want to be able to get here. That day, when the Rift Valley, the Great Rift Lodge decided that, we'll go with the presidency, Raila was disappointed, and so were some of us who were. But I was with him at Parkland Sports Club, and that's the day he was teaching me how to drink whiskey. But that's a story for another day. I'm going to invite, I'm going to invite Beth Siengo, whom I know from another life before. But she's the chair of the ODM Women's League and the vice chair of CMD. And the reason she's coming is because there are things that Raila did, and like he would be so far ahead of those of us who are in the campaign for equal rights, feminism, women's voices. So I just want her to come.